بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب زدني علما.
Okay, now in this section we'll try to understand the controller based SDN architecture concepts. Okay, so in the previous section, if you remember, we have discussed about the SDN controller options, how it is going to separate the control plane and the data plane. So probably in this section we'll try to understand the architecture and some terminologies relating to underlay network and the overlay network. So we'll try to see the difference between the underlay network and the overlay and the fabric, SDN fabrics we call them as. These are the concepts comes under SDN architectures. So most of the SDN networks, as we already discussed, they are completely based on underlay and the overlay. So if you want to achieve a separate control plane and the data plane, like we have seen in the traditional networks, we used to have a same devices. So all the networking devices will actually do forwarding, that is your data plane, as well as they make the decisions or build the routing tables or build the database. Now with the help of SDN, what we are doing is we are going to separate the control plane, and most likely the control plane task will be present on your SDN controller, and whereas your networking devices will be doing the job of a data plane. Okay, so we have seen these concepts earlier. So here we'll see the underlay and the overlay. So in short, to describe the underlay networks, now the underlay is the actual network which is being built, and we will be providing something called IP reachability, like end-to-end. Let's say I have a server here or a computer here trying to access another end. So we do have end-to-end reachability. So when you are building a network with a complete IP reachability, we call this as an underlay network. And the overlay network is actually on the top of the underlay. It is a kind of a virtual network which is built on the top of your underlay infrastructure. Okay, SDN fabric is actually the devices which are used in this architecture. So let's try to get into more details here. Like first we'll talk about underlay networks. So the first thing we need to understand, underlay networks relates to whatever the protocols and the features we are going to use to provide end-to-end IP reachability between the two endpoints. Like if we take an example, I got a specific computer here or a server here, and I have another server here. So we need to make sure that these two devices or any two devices in your network should have reachability. So that is your main thing what you are going to do. So the underlay provides end-to-end reachability between your devices. Now to provide this end-to-end reachability, what we are going to do in general, the first thing will be connecting. So we'll be doing some kind of connectivity, like using some kind of NIC cards or the physical links which are going to connect between the routers, switches, whatever the devices we use in between, we are going to provide the connectivity. And simply providing the connectivity is not sufficient. You need to make sure that we do have some kind of routing protocols, like IP routing protocols, which must be running. Any protocol like EHRP, OSPF, or static routing, or whatever it is. So that must be running on those devices. So once you do these two things, now we do have an IP reachability between the two endpoints. Now if I generate a ping request from here, so I should be able to ping or reach any other device within your network. So that is what the basic setup. So protocols or the features which are used to provide end-to-end IP reachability. That's the main thing. Now the next thing is, like all the links typically will be configured as layer 3 point-to-point links. Now what this means is, so normally we do connectivity between switch to switch, maybe switch to computer and then switch to router. So in general, whatever the things what we'll learn in our normal networks, so the links connecting between the routers will be L3, where we are going to assign an IP address on both the ends, and also we'll assign the IP here, of course. But the links which are connecting between switch to switch typically will be L2 links. generally trunk links or access links, the L2 links, where you have an STP running between the switches, and this STP will be deciding which port will be forwarding the traffic in general. So there is a separation of L2 and the L3 links in general. But whereas when you talk about the underlay network, which we are going to use in our SDN architecture, probably here all the links will be configured as L3 links. So which means the links which are connecting between this will be L3, and the links connecting between router to switch will be L3, and of course the links connecting between the router to router also will be L3. So typically that's the difference you need to understand when it comes to SDN networks. So this is actually a recommended design to have all the L3 links in your campus design. Of course L2 also works, but it is not recommended. So this is a typical designing consideration you need to understand while we are setting up an underlay network in your SDN. Now one more thing, once we set up the links, like we discussed that all the links will be L3. Now even the link here will be L3 here, switch to switch as well. Now just simply connecting the links as an L3, that is not sufficient. So we need to make sure that we run some kind of routing protocol so that we do have a reachability between this point and this point. So we have two devices, or any two devices in your network must have reachability between them. And that is only possible when you configure some kind of routing protocol. So most commonly routing protocols like OSPF or ISS are used, which are commonly used, we can say. Of course they support standard and supported by all the vendors. But you can still go ahead and use EHRP or BGP, any other routing protocol. It's up to you as long as it supports. Okay, so this is something this is not something new normally, because this is something what we have been doing for many years. The only difference we need to know is all the links will be L3 instead of L2 links here.